Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. While others continue to join us, let me go ahead and show you through the platform. When you join, you should see the public chat feature. This feature allows anyone to chat with each other throughout the presentation. Let's go ahead and try. Could you please share where you're joining us from today? Please go ahead and put it in the chat. Wonderful, welcome. While others continue to join, let me continue. You'll also see beside the public chat feature, a private chat feature. This will allow you to chat one-on-one with each other, or if for any reason today you have any technical issues, please feel free to use that private chat to message with me, Kiera, and I will help you today. Now, next to the chat, you should see the Q&A feature. This will allow you to ask questions throughout the duration of the webinar for our presenters today. You can put it in the Q&A feature, and you can also do a little thumbs up. You'll see it there. The thumbs up feature just allows you to upvote a question that someone else has already asked that you might be interested in. And when you see a little red dot next to the Q&A button, that will alert you that a new question has been asked. Now, next to the Q&A feature, we have our polls feature. Right now, you should already see a couple of polls. So if you'll go ahead and complete those, it just helps us to know who's joining us today. Now, throughout the presentation, there will also be additional polls. So please be on the lookout for those once you're prompted for them. You can just complete them, and then you can see the responses from other attendees as well. And it just like the Q&A feature, when you see a red dot next to the polls button, it just alerts you that a new poll has been administered. And so next to the polls, you should see the handout button. You should already be able to go ahead and download the handouts for today. And I'll let you know that those handouts are a little more extensive than what you'll see for the presentation. We really wanted to keep this very interactive, but this will just help you guide as a guide for our presentation today. Now, finally, if you have any issues today with your audio or video, please just go ahead and refresh. That's the easiest way to alleviate any issues. But again, like I said, if you continue to have any issues, please just private chat message me today and I'll be able to help you. And with that, I will turn it over to Donnie, and he and the other presenters will introduce themselves. Thank you again for joining us today, and I hope you have a good webinar.
Thanks, Kira. Welcome, everyone. Wonderful to see some people from my home state of Hawaii out there. So thank you for joining us. And actually, it's pretty early for you guys. So you guys are up early to do this. So thank you again. I'm over in Dallas speaking at another conference. So I'm actually coming to you from the hotel room. And actually, that might be very relevant to our talk today about this whole burnout and what we're looking at. We're going to start off today. Each of us here that you see, Sarah and Amber, we all have our little stories of kind of what we've gone through in burnout. So we're going to start with that. And so we're going to jump right in. So I'm going to share with you that I actually just had this happen to me this past fall. And for me, it was, I was actually working on a lot of things, actually a bunch of things related to the Center for Accounting Transformation. And I was actually loving it. It was exciting. We were doing great things. We were building out our team, and I felt really engaged. And I was also starting to read. So it wasn't like work the whole time. There was a bunch of work-related reading that I was doing. So I was doing that on the weekends, and I was next to the pool, but I was reading and doing stuff. And eventually I just got to this part where I was just, man, I'm just really, really tired. And what it really turned out to be was I really was working too much. I was putting in probably 50, 55 hours a week. And sometimes in our profession, it's like, well, is that all you're doing? Like, you should see what we do during tax season. This is not a badge of honor. This is really like, wow, I'm putting in a ton of hours. And the one thing I want to call out on this, though, was I was actually loving it. Until I hit that point, I did not feel tired. I was like, wow, this is exciting. I'm enjoying this. Let me work on this. Oh, now I want to work on that, because we were doing all this great and innovative things. And so I actually ended up having to take a step back. I had to actually talk to my team. Luckily, I have two great directors that work with me. I said, hey, I really need to take some time, I think. And they actually chimed in. All of my team chimed in. They said, we're so glad you do that because we didn't want to tell you, but we think you're working way too much. And so I ended up actually taking a couple of weeks off over Christmas holidays, completely disconnecting. And that really helped rejuvenate me. But as we started to go into the year again and we don't have a traditional busy season because we only do advisory work, we're really starting to, it's starting to happen again. And so I'm recognizing the signs, which we're going to talk about in a bit. So I won't share that, but having this awareness, and that's what we want to do today, is create this awareness around what can you do, what are you seeing, and how can you be more preventive on that. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Amber, since I see Amber's the first picture over there. And so welcome, Amber.
Thank you, Donnie, for your share, and thank you to the Center for Accounting Transformation for this opportunity. I'll tell my story about burnout, but before I do, I just want to say that burnout is nothing to be ashamed of. I've experienced it. I've gone through it, and then I recover, and then sometimes I get back there again. And I always like to share with people this idea that consciousness precedes choice and choice precedes change. So when you have consciousness or awareness of an issue like, oh, I'm burned out and I'm tired, then that gives you a choice. It's like, oh, in Donnie's share, I could choose to do something differently, and that creates change. And so it might not feel good to be burned out, but it really is sort of the portal and the opening to changing your life and reevaluating and realigning. So I would like to start off with my very first experience of burnout. And it was, while I can relate to Donnie's story of like having burnout because I was doing too much that I loved, for me, it was a little different because I was doing work that I didn't love. And so it came for me after working a busy season in tax. And it was a combination of working a lot of hours and a combination of what I didn't realize at the time was I was doing work that really wasn't aligned with my natural innate abilities. And so what it felt like to be burned out was exhaustion, right? Like, yes, I was working a lot of hours and I probably was, and I know I shouldn't say probably, I was not taking care of myself. So I wasn't eating well. I wasn't sleeping enough. And I really honestly felt super lost and bewildered. I'm like, this is crazy. Like I worked really hard to get a degree in accounting. I worked really hard to get this great job at this firm. I love all of my colleagues, and I really didn't want to be with the fact that I didn't like the work that I was doing. And that was like really confronting. And I think there's a big part of me that wanted to be like an ostrich and put my head in the sand. But sort of divine intervention showed up. And because I hadn't been taking care of my health, I probably was 20, 25 pounds weighed more than I do today. And a friend of mine, the divine intervention, said, hey, do you want to come with me and do this hot yoga? And I was like, yeah, I need to work out, right? So I went to hot yoga for my vanity because I, wanted to look good. And really what I got was my sanity. So what I didn't know then that I know now is that yoga, the practice of yoga, is really helpful because there's a lot of breath work that you do. And breath work is what really calms your anxiety the most. It's faster than a Xanax, and it's going to hit you faster than a glass of wine. Like if you're stressed out, get to your breath. And so for me, going and doing deep breathing, having this exercise of being on the yoga mat and really starting to reflect and getting in more of a reflective mode, like, okay, well, I don't like the job I have. What do I really like? What is really lighting me up and the day to day? And that was some of the sort of extracurriculars I was doing in the firm in the realm of people development. So I'll probably say it again, but I still do yoga today. So I first started yoga in 2003. And it is the thing that is one of the most helpful things to help me mitigate stress. So I know now, like, I'm actually about to physically move my house and my home office, right? So both at the same time. And I'm like, I got to double down on yoga this week because it's going to be stressful. So I better do yoga extra days now because it's predictable that having movers and packing everything up, and I'm like, what am I going to cook for dinner tonight? I already boxed everything up. I was like, it's okay. I don't have to stress because I did a bunch of yoga preventatively. So again, don't be ashamed of burnout. It happens to all of us, and excited to share more throughout this presentation.
Thanks, Amber. Sarah, you want to jump in?
I would love to. So thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be here. I'm an executive leadership coach and co-founder of Intend to Lead, and my personal mission is to cultivate more conscious, evolved leaders in the world. And I will tell you that in my position, the things I get to do, the people I get to support, the work I get to do, including sharing with you all today, does not mean that I'm an expert on all the things. And in fact, Donnie and Amber and I were talking about as we were preparing for this, that we're really coming to you all from a place of we are on the journey too. And I have experienced burnout many times throughout my careers. I say careers because I started out in public accounting, so I certainly had my fair share of burnout there. Then I reinvented myself, my career as a leadership coach and consultant. And even though, I'm here to support others and to do this important work, doesn't mean that I don't get burnout too. And so I'm just excited to be here because I've experienced so many challenges in this area myself, and I've had the honor of supporting others through it, that I have learned some important things along the way that I want to share. And so probably the most recent burnout that I experienced that was fairly intense and lasted for a long time was just in 2021. My husband at the time and I made the decision to get separated at the end of 2020, and we separated in January 2021. So there were so many emotions around that. And I also found myself becoming a single parent of a 6-year-old boy half of the time. So it's either half the time I was full on 100% single parent with no help during a pandemic. And then the other half the time I was intensely missing my child. And because it was a pandemic, I didn't have, what got me through was the supportive community, but I also had minimal contact with that community, right? Because of where we were in the pandemic. And so navigating and by the way, I love the work I do, right? So similar to what Donnie shared earlier, I was loving the work I was doing. And it felt like I had this whole other full-time job just to navigate grief, loss, the logistics of divorce. Where are we? Where are we going? The fears around that. And what I learned during that time was there was so much energy I needed to invest in taking care of me and still being able to show up as the mother I wanted to be for my child and just as the person I wanted to be, that I simply could not take on the level of work that I was doing before. And that was really hard for me because I'm in a support role. I have a lot of love. I love the people I support, but I had to consciously pull back a bit because I was tired all the time. Things felt harder and heavier. So that was an important learning for me, was giving myself the gift of that space to process what I needed to do so that I could heal and so I could show up in the ways that I wanted to for the people that I support. And so I learned a lot about asking for help, relying on my community, relying on my amazing business partner, Brian Cush, right, to get me through. So those are some important lessons that I've learned. I'm sure we'll talk more about them later. But yeah, just grateful to be here with you all and share more of this with you today.
Thank you, Sarah. And again, thank you, Amber. I think this is one of the big things we also wanted to raise through this is the concept of vulnerability. And so you see all of us sharing leaders within not just our profession, but within our organizations, whether you're a firm or with a regular business. Like, these are things that we have to share, and we have to be the role models as we move forward into things. Well, I think our next one, if I remember, and I think, Kara, if you can jump to the next slide there, I think we're handing back to Sarah. And Sarah's, one of the important things, and you heard each of us kind of talk about this, is how do you identify what's happening? Because if it's already happening, it's too late, right? And I come from the audit side, and we want preventative controls to stop these bad things from happening. So Sarah, if you can help us identify what some of this is, and take it away.
Happy to do that. And I'll say it's never too late. So I just want to chime in on what Johnny said. It's never too late. So even if you're feeling it, it's awesome that you're here. So let's just define burnout. And this is according to Psychology Today. Burnout is a state of chronic stress, right? So chronic is ongoing stress all the time that leads to physical and emotional exhaustion, cynicism and detachment, and feelings of ineffectiveness and lack of accomplishment. And I'll dive into what this looks like in the symptoms, but I just want to call out that so often we talk about burnout. I think we tend to think burnout becomes normal because so many of us are suffering from these symptoms. So I think it's really important to define it, know what it is, and to look for it within ourselves. So I'm going to take you through the signs of burnout. And as I do this, I invite you to just reflect and really listen and tune into yourself. Are you feeling any of this now? And when I say now, I really mean for some sort of prolonged period of time, because remember, burnout is a chronic condition. So it's not just maybe I had a bad day, but it's an extended period of time. So tune into yourself, say, does any of this apply to me? And the thing about burnout is it is a progressive disease. So think of each of these symptoms on a sliding scale, right? One end of the scale, it's just the very beginning stages, to this far end of the scale is very chronic, severe burnout. So also think about, where am I on that scale? Okay, so here we go. I'm going to check in with you all after this with a question to just see where you're at. So just listen and be on the lookout for what sounds like you. So physical and emotional exhaustion, beginning stages of burnout. Wow, maybe I'm just a little lower on energy than I normally am. I'm a little tired. Chronic burnout, when we are in severe burnout, we feel tired all the time. That's that exhaustion that Amber talked about that she felt, right? Just, wow, I don't even have the energy to do things I used to enjoy doing. I just don't even want to do anymore, right? I'm not interested. I'm wiped out. Insomnia. At the beginning stages of burnout, it may just be, it takes me a little longer to get to sleep once in a while. Just the little touches of it. But in severe burnout, even though we're chronically fatigued, right, when we feel exhausted all the time, we can't seem to sleep. Sleep eludes us. And so often that's because we can't turn this off, right, in our minds. The beginning stages of burnout, we can experience some forgetfulness. Maybe I just couldn't find a couple things, right? Maybe it's not that big of a deal. Or maybe I get a little distracted in my work. But then in severe burnout, it's really impacting our ability to get work done. No matter how hard we work, it seems like I cannot focus on things. I'm forgetting important things. Physical symptoms of burnout can include stress headaches, chest pain, heart palpitations, shortness of breath. We can have all sorts of digestive issues. We may even feel a little dizzy or faint. And again, those are all along that sliding scale of severity. When we are under chronic stress and we have burnout, our immune system is compromised. So that means we tend to get sick more often. I know for me, sometimes it shows up when seasons change. When I'm in a state of burnout, I'll just almost always get a sinus infection right away, right? Because that immune system is low. Maybe you're catching whatever cold is going around more easily than usual. We can experience loss of appetite. Again, anywhere on that sliding scale, it's a little bit to a lot. We can experience anxiety and depression. And I want to point out that we can certainly experience anxiety and depression outside of burnout, separate from that, right? But there could also be overlap here. So oftentimes when we feel anxious about our work, that anxiety can be just a little bit, right at the beginning, to debilitating when we're in severe burnout. Same with depression. Maybe we're just a little bummed out all the way till, the depression makes it hard to get out of bed. Anger, again, on that sliding scale, maybe I'm just a little irritable in the beginning stages of burnout, but when I'm severely burned out, I may have these blow-ups, right? I may even rage at times and say and do things that I can't take back. We tend to experience cynicism and detachment when we're burned out, which means, again, the things we used to enjoy, we're just not feeling them anymore. We're not interested. Maybe we used to be glass half full, but now that glass always looks to be half empty, right? We see the world through that lens of negativity. We tend to isolate and detach ourselves. So we not only feel separated from others, but we can actually separate ourselves. Maybe that's not participating in meetings, or not showing up to the meetings or not participating in the ones we're at, shutting our office doors, right? Not choosing not to hang out with others when we would have otherwise. So we really start to feel isolated and detached. And then just overall, when it comes to our work, maybe we just kind of quit caring. Why does it matter anyway? I worked so hard, I put in these hours, but I'm not feeling like I'm actually accomplishing things, right? So we pour in the hours, but we're not feeling productive. So those are the signs. And I want to say there are even more signs. I know there's a lot on this slide. There are even more signs, but I'm hoping this gives you a good feel for what burnout looks like and feels like, right? This progressive disease. So we want to check in with you all. Let's do this polling question. Are you experiencing burnout now or recently, right? And we've given you this whole sliding scale. Are you starting to feel it now? Because remember, step one is awareness. So that's great. If you are feeling it, we are not here to bring you down today. We're here to lift you up. So if you're here and you're feeling it, we are so happy that you showed up. Are you starting to feel it? Maybe you're full on in it right now, or hey, maybe you're good now, but you've experienced it more recently. In the past 3 months, maybe it was longer ago, or maybe you've never experienced it. Just let us know how you are feeling.
And while they're doing that, back on the last slide, so I don't even know what to call it, and that I was going through, because it was burnout, but I didn't have the psychological negative effects, but I did have, from that first column, I had a lot of those effects. So I was finding I wasn't sleeping as well. Part of it was I'd be like, oh, I have all this stuff going on in my head. I want to do all this stuff, right? I was having the fatigue, but I was still pushing through because I felt like, oh, this is exciting. I had the loss of appetite, and there was irritability, but it was different. It wasn't as negative. It was like, why are you slowing me down? Right? Why are you asking these questions? You should know this already. So it did come across. It wasn't like the typical negative ones, but my staff pointed that stuff out to me. They were like, yeah, you're being a little nitpicky on stuff. So you don't have to have everything that you're seeing there to go through burnout. It can be just a subset of that.
Absolutely. Right. Think of it as a menu of symptoms. And so, right. And it shows up in all of us, I think, in different ways too. Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out, Donnie.
From the poll results, we've got about 41% says they're experiencing it now. So, oh my goodness. 7% are saying, yes, I may be starting to feel it. So good that you're identifying that early. 22% said that they're no longer feel it, but experienced in the last 3 months. So if I add those up really quickly, let's see if I can do math, 70% have either felt it in the last 3 months or are starting to experience it now.
Okay. So, Donnie, can I chime in real quick with just some relativity there? So you just said about 70% have answered one of the first 3 options, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that tracks for the accounting profession. So overall, Gallup studies show that about 2/3 of the US population is in burnout or recently experienced it. And by the way, those numbers were pre-pandemic. I do this poll a lot in the accounting profession with thousands of people, and I almost steadily see about 75% of accountants. So y'all are tracking just a little below that, but real close to that. So I just want to point out that this profession can be challenging, and a lot of us struggle with this. So again, if you're in that 70%, if you're in the 30%, awesome. Like, still glad you're here because you can be on the lookout. And I also encourage you to think about how can you support others, right? Look for these signs in others on your team. How can you support them? If you're in the 70%, like, we are here to support you today. And this is really that opportunity to make a shift.
Great. Yeah. And actually, if we add the fourth option in, experienced it longer than 3 months ago, we are at 96% of people on the call have had some experience with it. Only 4% are saying they haven't had any experience with this. right. What's next on our agenda there, Kira? I think it's the next set, isn't it? So I think the key thing that we've discussed here is really recognizing the signs and the fact that, you need to make a commitment to making change now. Because if you don't make that change now, especially those of you that said, hey, I think I'm starting to see the signs, that's going to lead to burnout. But Amber, during our prep call, you brought up this concept of existential burnout, which
Yes.
I think is really important especially for our profession. So do you want to talk about that a little more?
Yeah, and there may be a correlation to Sarah's noticing, right? Like, hey, I'm administering this poll and I'm seeing a lot of burnout in the profession. And in fact, those rates are higher than what we're seeing in a Gallup study that is not, anchored back to the accounting profession. So the concept of existential burnout is it's sort of something greater. And how I'm hearing it in the coaching conversations that I'm having with high-level leaders in accounting firms is, we know it's uncomfortable, right? Like, we know COVID, there was a lot of work to do. We know we have a pipeline issue. We know we need to change, the structure of our accounting firm or our operations. And we don't know how, we know we have these challenges and they don't feel good. And then when you can't see that there's a finish line, like years ago, I used to run half marathons and marathons. And it's like, oh, when you're dying at mile 24, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, but I only have 2.2 miles to go. And so that provides some relief. That's like, okay, there's a buoy, there's something that's going to lift me up. And I think some of the real challenges right now that are attributing to the burnout is we don't know what the solutions are. We don't know how we're going to fix our pipeline issue. There's a lot of ideas out there, and it's a really heated conversation with a lot of emotion. And I think part of that emotion is that it is so challenging and we don't know the answer. And so when we don't know the answer and we have to grapple, that can be really hard, especially for accountants who love to know the how-to and have a checklist to solve something. And it's like, being in complexity and ambiguity is uncomfortable. So that's the part that I think is really kind of layering on to the conversation.
Yeah, and I think especially in our profession, one of the other things is we want to help people, right? That's why most of us, in fact, I don't know if I might even go as far as say all of us actually got into this profession, is because we really care about people and we want to help people be more successful. And because of that, and we saw this during the pandemic, a lot of us jumped in to help clients, and whether it's an external client or an internal client. So if you're in a controller CFO role, internal, right? The other department managers, the executives, the business owners, your internal client, we all jumped in to kind of help. And we saw a lot of burnout on that. That's actually what started us doing this whole series. If you missed our January webinar, we did a webinar then where we were talking about just this whole concept of personal resilience and actually gave some techniques there. So we're diving in a little deeper today. But one of the things I think we want to look at first is, we saw a lot of you there, whether it's existential burnout or this other burnout that Sarah gave us a lot of signs for. Are you willing to make a change? And we're asking you, if we can launch that poll, we're asking you to take a look and figure out whether the next set of things that we're going to discuss, whether you're willing to commit to making a change to actually ensure that you can help prevent this in yourselves. And as Sarah was indicating, actually also in others. That's probably especially all of us that are working together with other accountants, whether again, it's in a firm or in a finance department or internal audit, whatever you're doing, to raise this awareness, not just with ourselves, but with those that we're working with. And so as we get and see these results, I think let's start jumping into what type of changes can people make. So to start us off on that, I'm going to start off with something that I like to do, which is journaling. And this is something that I find I actually enjoy writing and things. So this is even like a double benefit to me, because when I'm stressed, I like to write, not necessarily journal writing, but I like to write articles. I like to write. I like to read books. I'm a very high literary person. That actually is my escape. But journaling, I found, is a really good way to do self-reflection. And I actually started doing journaling back when I first started getting involved at the national level. This is actually around 2005, because I wanted to see, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And I'm excited. So at first I started capturing that. And then I realized, actually, as I'm hitting challenges, journaling was really helpful for me to be able to take a step back and look at it and say, okay, what am I actually feeling? And for me, I'm the type of person too, when something happens or I do something wrong or I do something that I feel bad about, I keep replaying it in my head. And I go, how could I have handled that better? What could I have done? And I would find it would just keep going in my head. So journaling was also a really good outlet for me to sit there and say, man, this just happened and this is how I reacted. And I probably would have been better if I reacted this way, or in the future, if this were to happen, I would think it would be better if I handled it that way. Or sometimes I feel like I don't know what's going on. And so by writing it out, I'm actually thinking through that and figuring out, okay, this is what I'm actually feeling. It's not per se maybe actually anger. It's actually kind of self-doubt, or I'm questioning because somebody questioned something and I'm angry back at them. But really, it's because I'm questioning myself. So journaling for me was a really good technique to just get some things down. It let me sort through things, and it became this outlet. Once I had it journaled and out, I then could actually get to sleep. And we saw insomnia was one of the signs in there. Sarah or Amber, anything you guys have that you guys are doing too?
Yeah, I would add, I've journaled, and sometimes I've journaled like as a daily practice. Now that doesn't fit with my life, but it is part of a ritual. So when it comes to taking care of yourself, I always recommend a ritual, which is, what is something, if it's a small change, that I'm going to do consistently and reliably. So for me, I go to Monday night, I go to yoga. I don't have to think, should I do yoga today, tomorrow, when? No, it is that commitment to myself. I go to yoga, I get a great night's sleep, and I get up really early on Tuesday morning and I journal. I sit in bed with coffee and my little elderly dog and I journal. And a lot of the things that Donnie shared, I have similar experience. It really helps me to stop and understand the emotion that's going on. The other really valuable part is that you start to notice themes and patterns in your thinking, in your mindset, right? So when we develop and grow as a person, when we expand in our consciousness and our level of awareness, at first, we just have these rampant thoughts going on, right? And so whether it's yoga or meditation or journaling, you get to see, oh, I have thoughts. I can read my thoughts on a piece of paper, and these aren't the truth of who I am. It's just a narrative and a story that is running continuously in my mind. And is that an empowering story? Is it a disempowering? What do I want to do with that? I've noticed too in my practice of journaling, where's my time orientation, right? Am I obsessing about the past and how I could have done something differently and what happened? Am I worried about the future? Those are negative ones, versus am I reflecting on the past and going, what did I learn from that experience? Or am I imagining and dreaming in the future? What do I want to create? So it's almost I do love journaling, because I always talk with clients, imagine you could just get in a drone and just pull back the lens and look down on your life and yourself. And that process of journaling, I believe, really helps in that regard. So I recommend, but fit it in your life in a ritual way might make it really come alive for you.
Yeah, I'm smiling over here. I think journaling is amazing. Highly recommend if it works for you. And I don't journal. So I appreciate the benefits. But for me, it's just not my jam. I don't even like writing with my hand. Anyway.
What is your jam, Sarah? I know you've got.
I know. Oh, I'll tell you what my jam is. But yeah, I'm just laughing because I get hand cramps and whatever from writing. But very similar. And Amber mentioned this, the rituals are important. And so for me, meditation has been a game changer. I started meditating 2013. It changed my life. I started out 2 minutes a day. It was the longest 2 minutes of my day. I was like, when is this going to end? But like Amber said, when you have a consistent practice, even if it's just 2 minutes, you begin to notice those thoughts that run on mostly unconsciously in the background, right? For most of us, and they drive everything we say and do. And so that practice begins to create space between you and the thoughts. And that is the space where you can respond, and it gives you choice. So to me, with many, many years of meditation, and it has been a ritual, a practice, I got up to like 15, 20 minutes a day. Then I had my kiddo. Then I went way back. And honestly, right now, it is very sporadic for me. I'm not doing it daily. But the beauty is, over time, I've built that practice, and it's created that space to where, for me, it's a moment-to-moment thing. My ritual is in the moment when I'm feeling the heat, the stress, the pressure. I get a physiological response, and I can be mindful of that. I can breathe into it. Right? We were talking earlier about the power of breath. I breathe into that. I can be mindful. I can slow down, and I can tap into that space to decide how I want to respond. So I can come down more quickly, and it gives me that power of choice that Amber was talking about. So whatever that is for you, I know meditation can be really hard for accountants. And I feel like so many accountants say, I'm terrible at this. Well, that's because most of you believe that meditation is sitting in the Zen state and not having any thoughts and feeling really peaceful. That is not what it is at all. It's sitting with it, right? It's sitting with the thoughts and not feeling like I have to do anything with them. It's just noticing. So I'll share that because I think it has very similar benefits to journaling, because we get to observe ourselves and see those patterns. But there are different ways to do that. And like Amber said, like start small, start with something supportive of you. It could be checking in with yourself in the moment. What do I need right now? That's a really simple practice that I like to do. Just what do I need at this moment? And then give yourself that.
I love that, Sarah. And I think Sarah's calling out the real thing here, which is self-awareness, because that's what you're really trying to develop here. We all have that, the amygdala back here in our brain, which is the reptilian brain. It's the original one. They still have them in the crocodiles and lizards. And that amygdala is the thing that causes our reaction. It's the thing that gives us that adrenaline rush when we're in danger. And that is our original brain. It causes us to flee or get angry, right? And if you're cornered and then all of a sudden you're going to burst out, that's all of that adrenaline rush coming in there. So, and what we're actually trying to do with this is we're trying to get beyond that and come back into our cerebral cortex up here in the front, which is the biggest part of our human brain, and take that step back and go, okay, I see what's happening, and no, I'm not in immediate danger. So what is the proper or better reaction to this? And so whether you're journaling, whether you're doing meditation, that's this presence or this awareness that Sarah's talking about. I also use meditation as well, not as regularly as Sarah. I have a hard time doing that sit still. But for me, it is, I use it to actually go to sleep. I used to have a hard time sleeping because there was just so many ideas going through my brain and it would take me like an hour to get to sleep when I was younger. Once I learned that meditation, I'm asleep within 5 minutes. And I know that that's true because my Fitbit tells me how fast I go to sleep. So now I have data that says, and I was like, wow, I really go to sleep really fast. And part of that is the meditation. It's that learning to kind of quiet the mind. And it's, as Sarah said, it's not clearing it completely. It's just saying, I see what's going on, but I'm going to do what I need to do, which in my case happened to be sleep. I also used meditation. I just as recently as a couple of weeks ago, I had a situation where I felt like I was being bullied. And so I was having a lot of anxiety. I'm a fairly resilient person. I haven't had therapy in the past, had talked to others about therapy. And that was the first time I was like, wow, I really need to talk to somebody about this. But what I did to get that under control first was really to go through a meditative, do the breathing, and I could feel myself when something happened again. My Fitbit also was like, "Hey, you're in the cardio zone," and I'm like, "I am sitting here, and then why am I in the cardio zone? Because I'm thinking about the situation that happened." And so then I know, and I have that awareness to, okay, now I have to, let's go into breathing. Let's focus on what's happening. No, I'm not at risk. This is what we're going to do. So it doesn't even have to be a regular practice. As long as, again, you can have that awareness and identify, hey, something's happening, then you can, get one of these interventions into place. I want to call out too, Tiffany shared a great a tip there about building Lego sets. And, what that is it's that detailed work, right? And the fact that you're focusing on something and your mind is focusing on this detailed work. I've also done it gardening. Gardening used to be my meditation, because you're sitting there pulling weeds, and as kind of crazy and iterative as that is, it's also very restoring because it forces your mind into that space and to detach from everything. And I see Sarah saying jigsaw puzzles too. Yeah, whatever all of these things are, sometimes we think of them as like, oh, this is just this stupid thing that I like to do. They're actually restoring and helping you.
And what I would add to that, I learned from when I was a tax accountant, you need to almost, I think, like have the yin and the yang. So if you're in an office all the time, on the weekend, get out and garden and connect with nature. For me, I was doing a lot of analytical stuff, and during busy season, and every Sunday I would go scrapbook like all these these memories from traveling and creative with stickers and decor. And it's like I had to exercise different parts of myself to feel more even keeled, right? So just think about, okay, my day to day, I'm doing this, and that's great, and maybe I enjoy it. And how do I have like balance and harmony in what I'm doing so that I'm feeling like a whole person? There's an analogy I use sometimes. If you think about like this idea of technical and non-technical, imagine you go to the gym and you lift weights and you're only doing it on your left side, bicep curls on the left, you're doing your leg, and you're doing nothing to the right side of the body. And just like, it would look weird, it would feel weird. And I think there's a way in which, whether it's your intellect, your heart, your soul, how do you honor the different parts of yourself so that you're a whole self and not just really, bloomed on one side?
I think we've done a lot on this topic now. One of the other things that came out on the last webinar was the need to draw boundaries. And for those of you that were on that webinar, when we did our last question, which we're going to have the question again today, what are the things that you're going to change the most? Boundaries came up the most. So Sarah, Amber, you guys have anything to share about drawing boundaries?
Yeah, I'll share that one of the toughest boundaries to draw in my experience and in the people that I support, it's shutting off from work, right? So often we may finish work, we walk away from the work, but we're carrying it with us up here, right? Maybe that's why we can't sleep, because we're thinking about the things we should have done or could have done, or worrying about what we need to do tomorrow. And so and I've actually included a resource for this in the handouts with some guidance on how you can create a shutdown ritual for yourself. How can you mentally, physically, emotionally shut down from work? So a couple of big ideas are bookmarking your work, right? So often we carry all the anxiety and worry with us because we think we have to. Our mind is trying to cope and help us, right? Help us succeed and perform. But okay, so get it out of here and written down. Maybe it's bookmarking my work. I like to track what did I do today and what is on my agenda for tomorrow. I'm really clear on what I'm focused on tomorrow, and then I can set it aside. Another idea is to create an instead of plan. I love this one because so often we default to work because we're in it all day. So think about ahead of time, what will I do instead of work? So it's 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, whatever the heck time I'm going to shut down from work. What will I specifically do instead? Am I going to go somewhere? Am I going to connect with someone? Am I going to take a walk, right? But have a plan, because otherwise we kind of tend to stay in that mode of being that we were in all day. You can also create a shutdown practice where it's the signal to your brain that, hey, it's time to end work. So maybe that's physically cleaning up your workspace, shutting down your computer, turning off your phone notifications. Maybe it's dancing, listening to a song, maybe it's getting outside, maybe it's giving someone a hug, like whatever, but something that you do consistently every day. These routines, these practices are important, right? There's a theme here that we're talking about today. Find what works for you so that your brain knows it's time to be done. But I think that's a really, really important boundary for us to honor for ourselves.
Yeah, rituals and learning to turn the brain off are great. For me, and it's stuff that I guide people through also, is when I design my life, I start pretty big, right? So there's a way in which we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? I need to earn a certain amount of money to be able to pay my mortgage and for my daughter's private school tuition and the things I want to do. And I'm not looking to be a multi-millionaire. I had this wild experience where I lived in Monte Carlo when I was 19 years old and had an apartment. So I know money does not bring happiness, but I like nice things, right? Like I still do. So I'm clear like how much money I want to earn. And then the next thing I go to is what are the hours I want to work? And the first place I start, I literally go to my calendar and I carve in my time with my daughter. When am I picking her up from school? When am I dropping her off? I recently hired an executive assistant and I had on my calendar, I was going to pick my daughter up, and she went and booked like a call after I picked my daughter up. So she knew I was getting my daughter. And this executive assistant's lovely, and she works with other executives. And I think those other executives are like, oh, I'll go pick my child up and then I'll come home and I'll take a call. And I'm like, no, when I get my daughter, I'm done for the day, period. That's it. I don't do work. I'm in mom mode, and that's what works for me. And so when I have how much do I need to earn and how much am I willing to work, that creates this container of how I prioritize my time and my energy. Prior to having my daughter, I was a perfectionist. I would fritter away and waste so much energy preparing a presentation, this is embarrassing to say, but I would be getting ready to do a 1-hour webinar and I would write out the whole entire script. And it's like, no, it's so unnecessary, but I had this time and that's what I did. And so even to self-care and this time for rituals, I put my yoga in and then I go layer in my work. And that has been just a really helpful way to do the things that are important to me, to have the life that I want to have, and to overcome some self-sabotaging behaviors that I had. And like Sarah said in her year of divorce, like I've been divorced. I've gone through that also, but in growing my life and growing my business, I need support. I can't do it alone, right? I had to hire an executive assistant. I need other people to help me if I'm going to work and live in this way. And so it's just a thing that I've refined with time, and I've really seen the value, because when I do work, it's magical, right? Like, and honestly, my ritual is I do go to the yoga mat, and I think about work because I love what I do. So some of like my greatest ideas come when I'm on the yoga mat. Like I'm just so aligned to my purpose, but I don't think like, oh, I'm at yoga, I can't think about my job. It's kind of one of the reasons I don't like the billable hour, because I think people are like, oh, I'm in nature. Like I can't bill for this time. I shouldn't think about like a new innovative thing. I think it keeps us in this mindset of like, I only can bill my time when I'm at my laptop. And sometimes, maybe some people do need to totally shut it down. And I think that's probably the majority of the profession. But for me, some of the things that I just, going to dinners, talking to people, like it's important to do those things. And I'll end on that as a boundary. I've actually worked from home since 2005. So like, some of the challenges people are going through in organizations, I feel like I've lived through, because you have periods where it's awesome and periods you're like, I'm isolated. So that's like another thing that I incorporate into my schedule is when am I getting out of the house and being with other humans? Because I can tell you, I will never go to an office 5 days a week ever again in my life. And I need to be in person with people to have that magic and that experience. So I'm also like, a boundary for me is how do I have the time to be at home and focus or do laundry throughout the workday? And how do I make sure I get out and be connected with community and be in person with other humans? Because I think it's quite important for our emotional well-being.
I think that another thing to realize on this too, and thank you both for the great examples, is these boundaries and these rituals, they're very personal. And so I'll give you a different example of one of the women that I was working with. She was also the primary caregiver. And so her time to work was after she got the kids to school and until they came home. And then her second time to work was after she got them to bed. So she would be working from, say, 9 or 10 in the morning until about 2. And then she would work again from 10 till midnight. Now, the first time I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, why are you working so late at night? You got to stop. Like, this is bad. We're supposed to be like, we have this total flex culture and we're supposed to not be, you're supposed to have more of this work-life balance. And actually, at first she didn't say anything. And then after the second or third time I said it, she goes, wait. You got to understand that for me, these are the times that work for me to work because it lets me be with my family when I need to be with my family. And so, don't make these assumptions for other people. Make sure that you ask, like, what does make sense for your schedule? And for her, it happened to be this middle of the day and very end of the day. So it's really important that these are very personal type of practices, and it's about figuring what really makes sense for you, and especially if you are leading, to talk with your team and understand what actually makes sense for them, and to really have that flexibility. The other one that I always give an example of is sometimes I'll just hit that wall. So, it's not the big burnout. It's kind of maybe a mini burnout in the day. And I just hit that wall and I can't think. And so I need to go take a nap. I know that that's the solution to that. Well, I actually post into our general teams channel, hey, I'm hitting a wall. I'm going to go take a nap for an hour. Because as the leader, I know that I have to model and I have to let my team know it's okay to take a nap. And yes, it's in the middle of the day and normally you should have been working. But if you're hitting that wall and you're not going to be productive anyway, go and take that nap. And sometimes I don't come back after the hour. I tell them I am, but I'm like, you know what? I needed to sleep more than that. Or I woke up and I was like, I am still tired. I do need to not go back to work. Right? So being understanding about these, truly having flex time and being understanding. But as a leader, it's even more important for us to model this type of behavior. And we have to, even more than the others, show that it's okay to do these things.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I just want to jump on that, Donnie, and say what I often hear from people is, I know what my boundaries are. I set them, but like people keep trampling all over them. And so you are the only one who is responsible for your boundaries, because let's be honest, people are never going to stop asking you for things, right? They're never going to stop trying to schedule meetings after you pick up your kid, or right, whatever that is, unless you tell them, right? So I think we teach others what our boundaries are, the more we can communicate them, model them, like Donnie is saying, and let's enroll people to support us, right? If we speak as a team and we talk about what do you need, here's what I need, gosh, just think how you could level up everyone's performance by having that conversation. So communicate around it, know that a boundary isn't actually a boundary until it's tested, right? The more it's tested, the stronger you will get over time, right? The stronger you will get at honoring that for yourself. And so I also encourage you to have a plan for how you're going to respond when that boundary gets tested, because it will, and it should be. If it's a good boundary, it will get tested. So what is your plan? So you're not in that moment saying, oh, well, here you go, right? So often we default to the people pleasing, especially in this profession. So have that plan for how you can honor yourself.
And I love it. I would build on what you are both saying and when you don't stick with your boundary, journal about why not, right? Why did I say I wanted X to show up this way and instead it was Y? And get really honest with yourself about what it is. What is it that had me, as Sarah said, some people are people pleasers, right? Some people are afraid that people aren't going to like them. Or some people just grew up in an environment where it was like, you always say yes. Or I know for women, not me, by the way, because I was raised by my father, but a lot of women were raised to be nice little girls and to show up in a pleasant way. And you don't really realize you've been programmed. Your subconscious and your automatic ways of being have you show up a certain way. So if you kind of violate your own boundary, don't just get mad at yourself and upset. Go, wow, I can learn. What can I learn from this? You know, this is a real learning opportunity. And do some reflection, walk in nature, meditate, yoga, whatever, but just look and understand what it might have been driving that behavior.
Wow, the time has really gone by quickly. I can't believe we're already in the last 5 minutes. So I'm going to launch one last poll. And this is where we want to see, we've given you a ton of ideas, right? And like we said, not one of these is going to work for everybody, or maybe some of these work for different people in different ways. So as part of your commitment to change, with almost all of you said you're committing to change something, we want to know, what are you going to commit to change as a result of today's webinar? And we think, I'm not going to totally promise this because we haven't actually tested it, but we think we're actually going to be able to send you an email. So when you registered, you had your email in there. We're going to send you an email in 30 days that says, did you actually make this change? Right? As people are thinking through that and putting their responses in there, Sarah, Amber, any other last words of wisdom for people in dealing with all of this?
I'll share that I think to really create a life where you're thriving and not just surviving, it's love. And I have this heart on the wall behind me for a reason. Everything is love. So love you, choose you, honor and respect you, and know that you are more than worth it. And love others, right? Tap into that love. You know, we've all talked about the power of community today, right? So surround yourself with people who you feel that mutual love and support for, and people that are working on similar things, right? Those healthy relationships, those growth-oriented people can be so powerful.
Yeah. And what I would add to the conversation is to go for what you want and figure the how to out after, right? So as professional coaches, right? Sarah and I are both trained by the International Coach Federation. In that world, we assume the coachee is the expert on their life. So you are the expert on your life. You know what keeping you up at night. You know what you really want to do. You might not be listening. You can't hear it because you're in the day-to-day, but when you take time for reflection and you have more awareness of yourself, you know what you really want. And what I would have you do is go for what you really want and figure the how to out after. You can come up with a plan. You can, as Sarah said, like enroll other people in your life that can support you, but really just go for what you want and don't get stuck on how am I going to make it happen? Our profession is filled with people who want to help and be of service. And so I see heads nodding, you know, my colleagues here, we want to help, you know, like we want to help others. And there are others, thousands of others that probably want to help you too.
And with that, keep in mind that if we ourselves are burnt out, we can't help anyone. So it's important that we take care of ourselves. I saw something come in one of the chats, and I suspect it's Sarah because I remember talking about this, but I think she raises a good point, which is celebrating not only success, but progress. And so as you're making this commitment to change, maybe you don't hit it, right? And the analogy to this that always happens, it's that New Year's exercise weight loss, right? It's like, I'm going to lose this much pounds, and you don't do it. And you're like, okay, well, now I'm not going to go to the gym, and now I'm not going to do it. Just because you're not getting to wherever it is you want, don't see that as a failure. See it as now come back, okay, what did I want to do? Let me try it again. Because you heard all of us say, you've got these rituals, we have these things. Sometimes you just use it when you need it, and that can be success in and of itself. Just recognizing that something is happening and you need to be different, you need to respond differently. That's success in and of itself. With that, we are right at time. So thank you, Amber. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, everyone, for attending, contributing, your commitment to make a change. Let's make our profession much, much better. because without us making ourselves better, we can't help everyone else. Take care, everyone. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.